Welcome to Tabula Poetica. It's our 5th anniversary of this series. The series includes both poetry talks and poetry readings, and so we'll have the poetry reading coming up in just a couple of minutes. You may want to mark your calendars for the remaining events. We have visiting poet Lorene Delaney Ullman coming on November 11th for a special Veterans Day poetry talk and reading. And then on December 16th, we have an MFA reading. MFA students who are reading, raise your hand. All right, so you can come back and see these fantastic students. And yes, we'll let Martin Nickel read as well with the MFA students. Seriously, you can come and read your own poem. As I'm thanking people in the next minute or two, pull out your cell phone and make sure that you've turned off the sound. Numerous people and organizations on campus have made this reading series possible. Most of our support comes from the English department, and in the English department I want to especially thank Dr. Joanna Levin, who's the department chair, and also our admin, our administrative assistant Debbie Thacker, who does all the logistics and the paperwork and orders the fantastic snacks that you're eating. In addition, I have 2 graduate assistants. One, David Krausman, is the graduate assistant for Tabula Poetica, and the other is Erica Hoffmeister, and she's working with my undergraduate class this semester. We have 2 fantastic hosts on campus. The poetry talks occur in the Fish Interfaith Center, and we're here for the poetry reading in Leatherby Libraries. And I want to thank Dean Charlene Baldwin, who should raise her hand and wave, for hosting us and being a terrific partner with the Tabula Poetica series. This year we also have some funding from the Dean of Students Office and the Department of History. In addition, we're grateful for small grants that we receive from poets and writers through a grant that they receive from the James Irvine Foundation. Make sure that as we're going through the reading that you pop back and have some refreshments. Don't hesitate to pick up some snacks. We'll have some Q&A after Ben Ramke reads a few poems. And now I'd like to welcome Amy Newlove Schrader, who is teaching one of our undergraduate classes. She's a former visiting poet in the Tabula Poetica series, and if you haven't seen her poetry talk and reading, especially her poetry talk on the abstract and the concrete, I urge you to go to our YouTube channel and watch those videos. So here's Amy, author of The Sleep Hotel, to introduce our poet.
Thank you, Anna. It's my pleasure to introduce our visiting poet today, Ben Ramke. Sometimes when Ben Ramke is spoken of, the term experimental poetry is used, a term that I am afraid means very little these days, as we have perhaps used it out of its meaningfulness. And when we talk about experimental poetry, we often speak of juxtaposition, a word I fear that we have also become over-familiar with. So I decided to investigate the word juxtaposition. Here are some of the things I learned. The word juxtaposition dates from the 1660s, from the French, juxtaposition, from the Latin, juxta, meaning beside or near, plus the French, position. And that Latin root, juxta, is further derived from the Indo-European root word, yug. So thus we have it that juxtaposition shares a root with the words yoga, jugular, joust, and zygote, which is all very appropriate for Ben Ramke. Or as he puts it in his book Ariel, quote, everything is attracted to every other. These words, zygote, jugular, and juxtaposition, have to do with joining, with connection, with fusion, and this is the underlying modus operandi in Ramke's work. He is a joiner. Paradoxically, however, if you are a joiner, then you are also a disjoiner. By which I mean, if you are interested in the way that things come together, then you are also interested in the ways they separate and the ways they can be separated. To quote from Ariel again, this secret, separate sifting of a self-particulate drifting. So, for example, to return to these shared root words, the word joust also seems appropriate for Ramke's work. Jousting was what knights did when they rode headlong at one another and attempted to unseat each other from their saddles using long, pointy things called lances. And this unseating, I know, seems very dissimilar from the idea of connection. It seems like disconnection, in fact. But herein lies the genius of juxtaposition. By unseating us from the linear, the narrative predictable, the expected next step, we are propelled from the safety of our seats into the unfamiliar, or, as Ben Ramke put it earlier today in his talk, the strangeness of the thing. Juxtaposition forcibly combines both the absence and the presence, the unexpected and unforeseen congruities of facts, ideas, objects, memories, images, thoughts, and I could keep going. In this, I think he brings to life critic Marjorie Perloff's definition of collage, which she says creates a curiously contradictory pictorial surface. Ramke's poetry does this in spades. In his book Ariel, to mention just a few, here are some of the references. The Exxon Valdez, Rudyard Kipling, Recipe for a White Russian, Newton's Principle of Homogeneity, The Lifespan of a Cumulus Cloud, a quotation from the Quran, and the ancient Egyptian god Thoth. Quote, having cut myself loose from, Ramke writes, but he is also constantly splicing together. By cutting things loose from their ordinary meanings, he has loosened them into new and surprising meanings and surprising moments of loveliness. Or as he puts it, for the slippery, can't read my own writing. We'll skip that quote. When investigating the word juxtaposition, I also discovered that it has a mathematical meaning. It means the absence of operators. I have no idea what that means, but it's very appropriate for Ramke as he has a background in mathematics. He was educated at Louisiana State University, the University of New Orleans, and Ohio University. He's the author of 12 works of poetry. His first collection, The Difference Between Night and Day, received the Yale Prize. His newest book, Missing the Moon, is out this month from Omnidon. He now teaches at the University of Denver and was for many years the editor of the Denver Quarterly. We are very fortunate to have such a distinguished writer among us. Please help me to warmly welcome Ben Ramke.
Thank you. That was quite wonderful. Well, thank you for being here, all of you who are here now. Thank you for those of you who are responsible for my being here, Hannah in particular. This is not a road I can stay on very long. There are so many people that I would end up thinking. It's been kind of an extraordinary revelation to me, this place. It's a beautiful campus, beautiful institution in many ways. Also, I just discovered that we're in Orange, the city of Orange and the county of Orange. I grew up in a city of Orange in a county of Orange in Texas. You cannot imagine a greater contrast. I won't necessarily go into it. No, it was an interesting place too, but for vastly different reasons. So that introduction actually said a lot that's very useful to me. Thank you. There's a lot that I sort of feel that I ought to not explain, but then I get halfway through the poem and think, there, I don't want to hear this, and I think I should go back and have said things. So much of what the introduction did was useful to you. I hope you were paying attention. I want to make one additional claim. Well, first of all, the absence of operators. It just means that you don't have a plus sign, minus sign, something like that, which brings to mind, I mean, this being an operator, you know, plus or minus or multiplication or square root of. Without going through the long history, I think mathematics and poetry do have a lot in common. For instance, just consider the fact that both operate by means of, well, declaring equalities and then working with that. A equals B, and then you do something to A. And that means you have to do something to B on the other side to maintain the equality. My love is like a red, red rose. Well, it's a declaration of kind of equality. And then you have to think about the abstract term and make changes. Okay, I'll stop. But it's useful to know. I'm going to repeat a couple of things that I said in the talk earlier, just a couple, I promise. I read a quote from one of the translations of Lucretius on the nature of things. Early on, Lucretius says, "I know how hard it is in Latin verse to tell the dark discoveries of the Greeks, chiefly because our pauper speech must find strange terms to fit the strangeness of the thing." I love that. Our pauper speech, and the terms need to fit the strangeness of the thing. Maybe that's all I want to repeat. I'm going to read a few poems now. I will start with a very new one that none of you will have had any opportunity to read. The title of this poem is The Law, the Other Law. Plato said, "The world is a body of fire so we can see, and of earth so we can touch, but we cannot touch. The world consists of objects and properties. When I was a child, we would go to the movies whenever we arrived, would buy our tickets and find seats. When we recognized where we were in the story, we would leave. This is where we came in. The path of the planet Venus against the sky, a slow, an act of vision, not rare. Who has not seen in part, without recognition, without knowing where he came in? Even the blind can see slowly enough. Pretend the earth doesn't move. Let Venus make circles around us, complete in 0.615 years. After 8 years, a lovely path, 5-pointed out of a mesh of angles, emerges. Here is my theory of evidence under the law. Words are mine neither before nor after I say them. Words are mine when the saying occurs. Words is wrong. Sentences is better, but wrong. No to ideas, no to things. Poems, that works, members of the jury. Every witness a poet. Here is a problem. The man before you is not the boy who did it. The Greeks, Aristotle, had 2 words for number, one for amounts, one for quantity. How much, how many. Time is a kind of number, a number of change with respect to before and after. Before the event, he was foolish. After, he was guilty. In any garden this morning are caterpillars which in weeks will be butterflies. We are accuser and accused. We listen and speak. My now is not your now. In Timaeus, we learn the planets were made to stand guard over the numbers of time. You saw the shape of the path of Venus in the sky, the apparent shape of a line it drew against the sky, a dashed line of light in the night, brightly held in the eye for a year. Is it possible to know the passing of time if there is not change? If ripe fruit never falls, he is still innocent. 7 days and 7 years are the same number. 7 dogs and 7 mountains are the same number. We notice time when we notice change. Arithmos, number, metron, measure. Tears can be counted. Weight of water can be measured. Instruction number 1. The elements of the crime of murder in the first degree are 1. That the defendant, 2. At and triable in the city of blank, state of blank, on or about the date charged, 3. After deliberation and with intent, 4. To cause the death of a person other than himself, 5. Caused the death of another. Guilt is a privilege of leisure. Astronomy is a nostalgia, one of many. Consider the care with which one must look, the way we mark movement of those little lights against the dark, the pattern intricating itself in hope of being seen. I am happy to be like you. I am happy to like you. I am happy like you. To say, this is where I came in, implies the right to go out, a cycle complete. The end. Of that one, there's more. I'm not sure while I read that particular fairly new poem, I was just, it seemed somehow appropriate to various conversations I had today with various among you. And I mentioned to someone, to some, more than one, that I spent some time recently on a grand jury. So I cheated that indictment form. That's where I got that from. It's a curious thing to be on a grand jury. Anyway, back to other poems. Even though I keep telling myself just read, keep your head down, mumble directly into the microphone, I think there are things that I want to mention. One of the other characteristics of my poems is a tendency to borrow from all over the place, to steal interesting lines from other people, but I do tend to give credit. And I also just like certain phrases and don't necessarily follow through with the ideas that they're supposed to connect to. There are 2 mathematical concepts that I use in the poem that I'm about to read. One is called the 4-color map conjecture, and the other is curve of pursuit. I love that one. Curve of pursuit I'll deal with immediately. The German for it is Hundeskurve, one word. My German is bad. Dog curve. The curve of pursuit occurs when a particle, let's say, follows another one. Actually, the easiest way to imagine it is a fielder running to catch a fly ball. And the fielder automatically changes his curve to follow where the ball goes. So if the wind takes it, this is a curve of pursuit. I like that. The 4-color map problem was simple. The question was, if you, any kind of map that you can imagine on a 2-dimensional surface, what is the minimum number of colors it would take so that you could color every space and no 2 spaces are the same color next to each other? It doesn't count corners. So Colorado, Utah, whatever, those 4 states, they touch at a certain spot. At any rate, these things are simple to imagine, very difficult to prove, and the 4-color map problem was proven. That is, we now know absolutely 4 colors suffice. Aren't you glad you showed up? So anyway, here's the poem, Picnic Among Strangers. Spring leaves green and birds back cackling among the thorns and blaring sun. A day, a day. The time has come, sprung upon us, to gather again small humans among large mountains. Our thin thinking varies. Some consider the colors of the map, how many and where the borders touch, and whether a corner counts. Some make machines to think a thing or two. Some tremble. Obsessive observers watch each other and pounce upon occasion, occasionally converge. Sit opposite each other, hauntingly chewing. Conversation. We could see a word shared, required at dinner. It seemed to mean meanness, contrary verse. Turn with or turn against. Families fight, we told ourselves. Conversely, we turned together against the others, those away, those awash in the world. Every planar map can be colored with at most 4 colors. Everyone knew already. There came forth dogs from the house. 3 together followed curves of pursuit toward and then past. Then silence followed, and a day reflected a previous day. Contradiction as the path, most admittedly the way out. To speak against as to speak above. Shouting became the proof most general. Spring forward, fall back. And as 4 colors does suffice, any map imaginable brings us home, if home is various enough, widely ranged against mountainous possibility, party-colored and pretentious, pretended, imagined. A short one. Mean also means. By a predicabile, a Latin word, by a predicabile, Albertus Magnus means a thing of which something is or can be said. I Ching says, a bird takes flight, leaving its call behind. Fortune means telling, tallying, the means of profit, of prophecy. Here we are again, aging against each other. There was one once who made just and gentle plans. This was in the time of the birth of the gods. Meaning came later, meanness. I'm moving backward. I wasn't planning on reading this one, but I just can't stop myself. This will be for Anna. The title of this is No Place You've Been, and it has an epigraph from Italo Calvino. The Calvino story it's from is called The Distance of the Moon. This is Calvino. Climb up on the moon? Of course we did. All you had to do was to row out to it in a boat, and when you were underneath, prop a ladder against her and scramble up. It's a fabulous story. Concave reflections make flat worlds larger, more loved than the thing, reflection. Who has not climbed mirrored into himself in the morning, musingly magnified his face floating above water? At the waterhole, animals gather reflective at dusk, Africa on Sunday evening TV. The endearing giraffe splay-legged over an image of giraffe drinking, sister image. A garden enclosed is my sister, my spouse, a spring shut up, a fountain sealed. Song of Songs 4:12. Asymptote, another symptomatic morning after the night of rain, a night of random rain. I wanted to watch clouds arrive after drought, but they came in the night, thievish, then fled at the light. I awoke. It was only today, not yet tomorrow. I will again awaken into a day still folded, waiting like laundry for use. I wanted to name clouds arriving, a function of time and topography. Clouds, a curl of air and water over mountains, clouds, like lenses through which to watch the wavery end of season. Someone entered our city under cover of umbrella, the first of many, the last to linger. He learned a new language. He came to stay, stray. Daily I stroll contentedly in my garden. There is a gate, but it is always shut. Plants produce organic stuff from inorganic matter. Animals don't. Animals die of lack. A tiny world teems with anguish, with narrow stems through which fluids flow, topped by gorgeous, outlandish flowers. A bloom is a blessing because. Was the gate blessing or curse? Was the gate protection or denial? Was it a gate, hand through, or a door, hand against? 1,000 grasses under my feet, I walk in despair or in ecstasy, crushing that which cannot move. The smells of a garden include filth which resides in the mind, mingles like Adam and his wife, hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden. Genesis 3:8. Laika traveled farthest of any dog and suffered, as animals do, a lonely death in the modern mode. The day before launch, Yazdavsky brought her home to play with his children, animal among animals. The next day, encased in a capsule, traveler trapped. A garden enclosed is my sister, my spouse, a spring shut up, a fountain sealed. This difference, animals from human animals, plants from inorganic matter we made from it, rockets in random places, teem with anguish, with narrow stems through which fluids flow. Happy the hare, lucky the leaf. Happy the hare at morning, for she cannot read the hunter's waking thoughts. Lucky the leaf, unable to predict the fall. W.H. Auden. Gorgeous outland, earth, animals die of, dearth, tiny world of privation in, curious word, space. We're done with that one. I'm sure most of you know or remember Laika was the name of the dog that the Russians sent up in a space capsule. And for a while, there was some pretense that there was a plan to actually bring Laika back safely to Earth, but turns out, no. Just saying. Another moon poem. So this is different. This is mainly a painted moon. Moon and Autumn Grasses. The title of actually a screen in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Japanese folding screen. Tawaraya Sotatsu painted it in 1640. A preamble along this shore this evening. The principle of maximum ignorance, as darkness crept cleverly close. Closeness our constant condition. We said modern, but didn't mean what it meant. We meant recent. We meant us. I am, like you, deferent. Like lovers, we didn't object to wandering, would wend and wind and wand. Join me in wind, verb, noun, back at the beach. I know your lovable qualities. I have a theory of calculus and time. To calculate a to calculate place, a spot on the beach relative to something which recalculates its own position. Stones on the sand, impressions relative to footprint. ghost crab, stray dog, common gateway interface, a place, our place. We made words together. We discovered a lost word, purlieu, land on the edge of a forest, from purely, French, pour, thoroughly, and aller, to go. Under the light of the night, the whiteness of the eye lies always open behind lids and liquids, tears and terrors. Nothing can be said safely. Recall courting, flirting. I made claims, often wrong. I, being wrong, started new futures. Is the moon a silvery streak in water? The moon was a silver disk, a Japanese moon on a painted field, a folding screen. The moon, pure silver, became corrosion after 200 years, a black smear, art thwarted to black from sulfur in the air of the reflective moon in the mind of some painter defeated by the elemental. Selenium, a nonmetal, often replaces sulfur in metal sulfide ores. Selenium was named for the moon, as tellurium was named for Earth. We call this asterisk, but I want moons on the page to mark change like day to night, month to next month, time, not space. Precision is a way to separate space from time. 1 second of arc, a degree of precision. But spherical excess means a shape will not close if calculated on a plane, then measured on the Earth's surface. Under moonlight, the Earth is big, the mountainous moon small. I leave a track with pen, ink, a corrosive trail of intent. The reflective liquids no more than the dark. There is a trail left by the snail in the garden tonight. There are asterisks all over this book, between sections. Stars. Esters. There's more. I'm going to try this one. I have to say, one reason that I read peculiarly is I often depend so heavily on the appearance of things on the page that I keep being tempted to stop and footnote things for you. And then I don't. So there. This is a molecular vision clouded. If it is true that Velázquez intended the exposed weave of canvas to indicate brickwork in the wall of the Jardin de la Via Medici in Rome, then how modern of him to allow the thing itself to shine through simulation. Can you hear a future? No, it is only vision. An interest in the lifespan of clouds informed his vision of the impossible, the old use of shine to be transparent. Through paint the canvas shines, or the paint is thin stuff, it shines through. Can you see a future? No, it is shiny. Do you know Velázquez, the forge of Vulcan? A piece of iron glows orange, or seems to. In Abbeville, I would watch my uncle at his forge make metal glow, and what would shine would be turned and twisted into use. But it seemed to me I could see, through iron, into the source of shine, atomic. I gave you the footnotes for that one. I've always been interested in, I don't know, it was weird. Growing up in Orange, Texas, I thought it was such a, pardon me, a silly name for a city. It turns out it's not, but it seemed to me at the time. And I sort of disliked the word orange. And because of that, I guess I disliked the color orange. And it just occurred to me, so I moved to Denver, where half of everything in the city is painted orange and the other half blue. Football. So here I am. I'm going to read some older poems out of a book called Theory of Mind, New and Selected Poems. I'm going to read a few things from the new, which are no longer new. But they involve a couple that have numbers about them. This is called the 12 Symmetries. Each of the little sections has a number. You can probably guess, from 1 to 12. And each has a title. And I don't know whether they really go together or not, but that's why I numbered them separately. The 12 Symmetries. 1. Was it what it was? I walked up all your stars' stairs to wake you, walk you home, but you were not there where the talking was taking place, taking the place of, the pace of a love affair, afar, affair, love, and languor. Language will do that. Rise, balloon, blue balloon. We are not to fall together. Each falls apart from the other. An asymptote, a kind of selfish kind, a clinging. 2. Later there was. Inclined this way, the head is zero-shaped and tightly filled with memory. As a child, I was terrified a balloon might burst at my lips. The sound would deafen me, the concussion, a kind of rage released. After the party, little deflated splashes, color on the floor, also cake crumbs and sticky remains, the breath of the mother, the decor of the day. 3. So he was. Naturally naive, I believed the balloon bursting would release the secret I had whispered too loudly, blowing it up, someone listening. 4. Paper. She and I will rise burning paper, paper burning, us rising. It will be a trap, a trip, us two making out of paper and paste a balloon of our scraps, those letters, those poems. Burn it up, we said, laughing as blisters formed. O furious balloon with words of oh. 5. Cures for the cynic. That O quickly fills or empties a catastrophe of zero. Take my life, for instance, emptying and filling like any old bathtub, or yours, a circular tub, an agony of porcelain. 6. Categories. The basic symmetries of the lie are 4. Lies of shame, of disgrace, lies of need, and lies of comfort. Each of these engages metaphor, irony, and poetry, or self, other, and us. Or the lie is a common friend, full of foreboding, but willing to hold your hand in the dark hours when bright anxieties await just beyond the corners which need turning. 7. She said, "This is not to say," she said, "that I forgive you." She said this unhooking an item of clothing. It was a small item, nothing that would be noticed, but by one who understood the nature of need, the kind of need he would feed on, self-cannibalizing need, which required at all costs to be covered by some sort of clothing, some small wisp which could be secretly hooked into place while no one or she was looking. 8. Group theory. The tetrahedron, too, has 12 symmetries. 9. Restrictions. What one must not touch. Baby birds, fallen. The emulsion side of the film. Oneself. Others. Delicate objects. Delicate subjects. Dangerous objects. Open sores. Close friends' children. The children of strangers. The actual eyeball. The exposed interior. 10. Truth. A casual survey taken of his own erotic fantasies left him quivering, for no one can bear his own or her own despair sexually embodied. No body can bear its own weight, but will soon and seriously reject symmetry, all mirrors turning opaque, all echo silenced. 11. What will it become? My breath is continuous and dimensionless. My breath is continuous and dimensionless. Dimension being simply what is needed, the space within which you can show what it is, whatever it is. For instance, I have a balloon in 3 dimensions whose surface is 2. I draw her face on my balloon, tears in her eyes and mine. During the night, my breath did escape, a whisper from her throat, my love's, a dream at some distance. 12. An end. All day I said goodbye, and then I failed to leave. The lie was uncertain. Was it in the not leaving, or was it the saying itself? Question mark. I'm just going to read one other. So, will it be the 72-page one? No. One other poem with numbers. It's only a page and a half. There are 7 manners of loving is the title of the poem. And there's an epigraph from Beatrice of Nazareth. I was obsessed with these women of the desert for a time, writers of Middle Ages. She wrote, "What gives the soul its deepest wounds brings to it best relief." A useful concept, soul, similar to the square root of -1. Utility. She breathed upon me, and I did wake. When the boy was a boy, he woke one morning and was no longer young, but still a boy. What to do with such a moment is the soul. The word means only itself and is a manner of loving, the first. The second is this. One morning the boy awoke and was young again, and laughed at nothing, and nothing laughed back at him and spoke. The third manner of loving is death. The fourth manner of loving is when the first bird of the morning visits your feeder, and morning glory gleams in the rising heat even before the sun, and the dew of the morning hisses into vapor, and from your window you watch afraid, but still you stand there, and a life. No, there is no fourth manner. A fifth manner of loving is to wait in half light, half your life, and count the small winged bodies which gather on the windowsill. Your cat will come to you and whisper in her way, and she will look as though she is looking at you, but really you do know the love of the world is in the small flickers of her tail, which have to do with anything but you, have to do with the history of the mitochondria, with the shape of proteins well folded, and with the many molecules floating into your vision, some translation out of a nice small century past. A sixth manner of loving is to climb into the family you have and hold on to any scrap of them which remains after the floods and the simple storms which break things. The breaking of things is the world, but is also its manner of loving, which is horror, and we thought we had moved past this error, which is the presentness of the world which kills us, which is disease and famine and flood, and others, you know the list. It is the soul of the world, but when the people and the place you came from are flooded and scattered, and the last of your uncles lies in a suburb of Dallas, breathing through a machine that is also the seventh manner of loving, praise. The water which comes with the storm and fills the small valleys and the houses of the people is a love, but is not a manner of loving. The thingness of the water is beyond us, is in us already. We die of it, true, but any wound wavers. We'll stop there. Thank you.
We have a few minutes for Q&A if you have some questions from the audience.
Really, here I am. That's such a great question because, well, there are a lot of different things I can say. In that one in particular, and I'll just use that to start. This book came before it, and it's the so-called new and selected poems. So-called because I guess that's what it is. It's new and selected. So the new poems in here I collected under the title Anomalies of Water. And it looks like there are 60-something pages of it. That actually began my thinking about, particularly about clouds. And, well, the punchline is it led to that collection, that I started sort of thinking in that I don't know, set of possibilities. I don't like to think of it as boundaries, but anyway, something like that. So that happens to be a case where I can actually trace something that was going on. I should point out that, excuse me, I'm very interested in etymologies, and I use any kind of source of various etymologies, whether they're accurate or not, doesn't really matter. It's this idea of there being a kind of story. Well, anyway, I discovered that the Middle English word clud, C-L-U-D, long line over the U, I guess clud, gives us both cloud and clod, both fluffy stuff up there and, the hard, dense stuff that we walk on. And I just love that kind of thing, that, I don't know whether it's contradiction. I'm thinking about things you said in your introduction. And that particular book, I think Ariel continually works between sky and earth like that. I will say also, my first books, even the first four, it was so amazing to me that a thing called a poem could happen, and that it could happen to me. All I did was I looked around for ways to get something started so that I could make something out of language, and then I couldn't wait to finish it. So I'd have it there, and I could hold a piece of paper and say I did it. And so I had no plan, no strategy when I collected about 50 or 60 pages. I started thinking of it as a book and stuck it together and would find themes, because all of us human beings are things that we get interested in, and they'll come into the work. So they happen that way, sort of randomly. I kind of liked the energy that went into that. Later on, I would tend to write a few things, find something that seemed to be shared by them, and start exploiting that and forward. If there are other questions, I promise to make the answer shorter. Sorry. Very interesting question. I don't know why the end of your question is what has thrown me. Purely emotional subject. So the short answer is no. There's probably I don't think there's a difference, but probably because to me I don't see those two categories. That the ones that had the sort of scientific or mathematical elements in it were also engaged in my experience of writing it with the emotional sort of as well. I'll have to think about that more. Because there probably is a distinction, such as what you're saying. But the feeling to me was, I guess, much the same. Yeah, it does. I was thinking, in fact, when reading one of these last ones. Here, let me read them again so we can... No, I'm just kidding. Where is the... Well, instead of... it was the thing about the square root of -1 and the soul being useful concepts. I still think that was, the concept was still a sort of a love poem, both kind of spiritual and carnal love being brought together, even though there was the use of this particular mathematical thing that he used with it. I love that idea of the square root of -1. Well, anyway, won't go into that particular sermon at the moment. But I see it as much spiritual, if I can use that term, and in a way emotional as anything else. Yeah. Chris. Probably when I'm writing it now, I don't think about it at all. I probably should think about it more. I did think about it many times in the past. Sometimes I'm even slightly embarrassed by how much I use this. We had a little, some of us had a little discussion earlier about Gerard Manley Hopkins. Someone had asked me at the talk earlier about the first poet that I became interested in and why I moved from starting in mathematics into poetry. And I said Wallace Stevens, and that's true. Excuse me. But at the same time, about the same time, I was discovering modern and, 20th century poetry. I first read Gerard Manley Hopkins as well. And I think it had a really great influence on me. And I still, I sort of organize thinking by sound. So the fact that my answer to your question, no, I don't think about it, what that means is that it's so much a part of what I do that I don't. And I often have to go back, actually, and get rid of some of it, because it's sometimes a little much, as they say. Okay. Yes. Yes. Inappropriate? No, I don't. The numbers and figures are emotional. I know that there are some people who respond very strongly emotionally to numbers, figures, who are very disturbed at asymmetrical presentations of geometrical figures and things like that. I'm not saying that we all respond in that way, but I don't know. I guess that there is a kind of emotion in them always, because they are human constructs, because they only exist as human constructs. And then, well, that could be a long discussion too, but it is a kind of an imposition from within onto the world, and then it comes back to us in this kind of reflection, and our emotion went into it. I keep thinking about that. Oh, yes. So finding something that you're interested in, finding a way to make whatever it is you're doing something you really care about and have an interest in, was the first part of my answer to that question earlier. Another part of the answer might be to ignore people like me, but I'll go ahead and follow through on it. As to the question of whether, well, I think I've somehow maintained all interests I've ever had, which is sort of a problem. I continue to collect stuff, pictures and scraps out of magazines and all kinds of things that I have an interest in, and they will continue to reappear in work, and then it expands and moves into other things. What I'm really getting at, though, as far as sort of advice for younger writers, is to as quickly as possible turn what you're doing into something that you genuinely care about. And you can take assignments in a class and find a way to, even though the teacher wasn't trying to get at whatever it is that you care the most about, you can find a way to put it in there. And the way to do that, in a sense, I believe, is to go back to what you, Amy, so graciously said earlier about poetry being experimental. Make your poem an actual experiment in which you're experimenting on yourself. You try things out. You, I don't know, even pretend to interests in something to see where it takes you. Probably nearly everyone begins doing this kind of activity by imitating other works. I think we all do that, and we actually continue to do it, but maybe in a more sophisticated way. And while doing that imitation of something out there that already exists, you find a way to make it yours. So there. Oh, your assignment. Thank you.